Hey everyone, my name is Kevin and I am back with yet another video. Superhero movies are very good, but sometimes the studio that makes them sometimes make the story really bad. We do see in trailers that they're really good, but once we see them film, they're actually really bad. There are some studios that actually succeed in making them, and sometimes they succeed the first film so well that they make a universe out of it, but sometimes they fail and sometimes they don't. And that's exactly what this video is going to be about. But it's gonna be more of like a rant video rather instead of it talking about the history of every superhero movie I've ever heard of. So yeah, that's pretty much what's gonna be happening. I'm gonna be pretty much talking about pretty much the superhero movies that has been talked about and has been known for a very long time. Keep in mind, I'm only talking about the ones that I've heard of. So if I don't talk about films like Daredevil or Hellboy, well, now you know why. So let's start to the beginning, not to the very first one, but somewhere to when Sam Raimi's Spider-Man came along. So when the first Spider-Man film, that was updated in filmmaking, was actually updated really good. It was actually pretty good when I was younger, but as I was older, I kind of found it kind of stupid. I mean, the physics and stuff is actually pretty poor, and it was old, so of course it's actually bad. But Sam Raimi did actually do a good job with the first two, with the first two actually having problems, and the third one being the worst out of the three, which actually led the series to actually end. And around that time, that's when the X-Men movies started coming in from 20th Century Fox. And sometimes the timelines are actually pretty confusing, so yeah, it's actually pretty confusing. Of course, most fans was just going to ignore that statement and actually was just going to enjoy the films as they came out along. But to me, I just didn't find it that amusing in my opinion, which is why it didn't entice me to actually watch it. And skip ahead for a little bit, and then we go to Fantastic Four, where the first one was actually a success that most people actually praised for a sequel. But most people thought that the sequel was actually pretty bad, which also led to this second one, also a new movie also being canceled. Now that's the problem with superhero movies around that time. Once you praise for a film for a sequel, and you get the sequel, you get mad for what the studio does. Now, Spider-Man wasn't officially owned by Sony around the time that Sam Raimi was making these films. At least I don't think so. And around the time that X-Men was making films, the series never really ended. The only two movies that actually failed after their sequels was Sam Raimi's Spider-Man and 20th Century Fox's Fantastic Four, with the X-Men series still going. And then after that, we go to a thing where Marvel decides to do this thing where they take Marvel villains and turn them into anti-heroes. So, who, may you ask, is the first anti-hero? That is actually Ghost Rider. Now, Ghost Rider is a character that I would actually think is somewhat of not really exactly a good villain to turn into an anti-hero, since he kind of sucks souls out of the guilty and just leaves the innocent alone, which I actually do believe that's actually a pretty good superhero. But do you really want to see a super villain being a superhero around that time? Because that was around the time when Marvel movies were actually starting to be pretty bad, and around this time the X-Men movies were still being good. Like, there was absolutely no problems with the timeline at all. Well, there were still problems with the timeline, but they still kept watching it. One of the problems being Wolverine's origins, where Deadpool was officially in the timeline, but then he was off somehow after his head was cut off, and he was never heard from after that film. And that was actually kind of bad, you know? It was just really, really bad, in my opinion. Well, and back to Ghost Rider. Ghost Rider, he's just not exactly a villain I would actually turn into an anti-hero, since he was like a normal person that had his soul sell to the demons from the underworld, and then he just sucks the soul out of all the other four bad guys that is trying to take over the world Yeah, I just don't. It just wasn't good around that time. Skip ahead a few more, and then we go into Hulk 2003, where it kind of tells the story of, well, an original story of Hulk and how Bruce Banner becomes the Hulk. And I have to admit, it was actually pretty amazing, but most people thought it was trash, and then the series just ended after its first film. This also led to DC's first best live action motion picture, which was Dark Knight. But turns out there were two Dark Knights, so I'm going to talk about those two in no order. So the first Dark Knight, where it features Joker as the main villain and Two-Face as somewhat of a side villain in the movie, it was actually pretty good. I actually liked it. I really liked it how Two-Face was actually established into the series, but it was actually kind of bad since we didn't really have enough of him. Like, if we had him somewhere in the beginning, maybe we would see more of him, but we got too much of Joker. Now, Joker is actually somewhat of a crazy villain. He's determined to kill anyone just to kill the bat that was chasing him for so many years, and well, there you go. But either way, it was actually pretty amazing. I really did actually like it. And after that, we go to the birthplace of Thor, Hulk, Iron Man, and Captain America, which is called the MCU, where they make movies of Marvel characters that haven't been sold to the rights to, like Spider-Man and the X-Men, and they make somewhat solo films connecting into the universe. And most people thought it was going to be Incredible Hulk or Captain America that was going to start off this little MCU thing. But no, it was actually Iron Man, and that was actually a pretty good choice. But here's the thing about the Phase 1. It started off kind of bad, but then it ended off really good. And it showed me that the MCU, it did start off bad, but the first part of it ended off good. And it was actually a pretty good ending to the first phase. And then the second phase was good, and then the third phase, which we're still in right now, somewhere in the middle of the phase, in the MCU, we get the reboot, or rather instead the remake of Fantastic Four, where their origin story is retold, all the characters are remade, pretty much everything is rebooted, I guess. And after that, it pretty much retells the story on how Doctor Doom becomes Doctor Doom, and how the Fantastic Four becomes the Fantastic Four. Like, Johnny gets his powers by being shot with a boulder, a meteor or something, and Ben, he becomes a rock just by being pelted by space rocks, and Mr. Fantastic, well, he just gets his powers just by being stretched or something. I don't know how. It was never really explained. And yeah, how they got their powers was actually pretty bad, and most people thought how the story was established, it was actually pretty bad. I really did agree with them, and somewhere around that time, that was when the Amazing Spider-Man failed in the sequel, and I thought the first one did very well, but the fight scenes were actually pretty poor. Not to mention that the sequel was actually bad because it did the same thing that Sam Raimi's Spider-Man 3 did. It failed horribly. Absolutely horribly. Now we're in Phase 3, and somewhere in Civil War, on the same year, we get a release of Batman v Superman. But at the same year, we also get Deadpool. And let me tell you, Deadpool was actually pretty good. He was actually a pretty good anti-hero in this one. He had a lot of comedy, and how he broke the fourth wall was actually hilarious. And we also got some other films, like, not to mention that at this point, the X-Men timeline is still going, and the series hasn't ended. Like, there's not one film that everyone hated that caused the series to end. So there was absolutely no point to actually talk about this one, but yeah. At this point, we're getting another X-Men film called Dark Phoenix, and I'm pretty sure it's gonna be. I'm not really gonna see it, but I might see it. And after that, we pretty much covered pretty much everything up to here. Well, except for what we got in somewhere in Phase 3, where where the Guardians of the Galaxy get an upgrade from pretty much everything in their sequel. Spider-Man is officially in the MCU by getting his own solo movie, and finally Thor gets redeemed in the MCU, and then we are ready for Infinity War. Go into 2018, and then we're ready for Black Panther and Infinity War for the MCU, and for the DC, we're ready for Justice League and Aquaman, which was actually pretty bad. Both of them was actually pretty bad. They kind of rushed it, you know. They tried something that the MCU did and failed epically because they were rushing it. They started with Batman v Superman and Wonder Woman, and then they just failed epically. There was absolutely no point of them even trying. Try to make your own story. Don't rush it into it so much. Okay? Okay. Not to mention that at this moment we've finally gotten through, and we also have another anti-hero, which is Venom, and I have to admit it was actually pretty amazing. I finally get to talk about him. Sony didn't really do a good job with the Venom character, but it was still enjoyable to watch. And also they were actually good with the Spider-Man character. They made an animated story of Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, and it was actually pretty good. Amazing. Awesome. I just wish it was actually live action in some way. I mean, it could have worked better if it was live action, and the animated Spider-Man was something different, but it was still actually pretty good. I just wish it was actually better than what we expected. And after that, we officially gone through pretty much all the superhero films that we actually need to cover. All there's left is Captain Marvel, Avengers Endgame, and Spider-Man Far From Home. And also, we also have some other sequels like Dark Phoenix and a bunch of other superhero films that will be coming out next year, which I'm gonna be ranting on soon. Yeah, because it was kind of a rant. Overall, superhero films, all superheroes aren't as perfect as you think they are. There are good ones and there are bad ones, and the superhero films that we got, well, they were half as good and half as bad. I mean, we had more good than bad, so we got something out of the beginning of the MCU and the DCEU from Marvel and DC. But I think DC should stop trying to be Marvel and start being themselves. And in other words, just make your own story, DC. Stop trying to copy your rival. But in other words, that's all I have to say. Thank you so much for watching. This is kind of like a rant or maybe like a history video. But you guys can let me know in the comments below what you guys thought of the video. Don't forget to like the video, share to your friends and family, hit subscribe for more content, and let me know in the comments what you guys thought of the video. My name is Kevin, and I look forward to hearing from you.